AKS Daily News Analysis of the Hindu newspaper dated 8th February 2020 of Hyderabad edition. The first article taken up for discussion is from page number 1. The article here is talking about the mood of Prime Minister appreciating the Bodos for the Pace Pact which was recently signed, and also he tried to address the fears over the Citizenship Amendment Act. And here he made a mention talking about the previous governments who never tried to solve the issues of the Northeast, and the Bodos have received respect only after the 5 decades, says our Prime Minister. So this was the first visit by the Prime Minister after the Citizenship Amendment Act issues has been taken up in the Assam region. And here, while congratulating the Bodo people, he also urged the youth of other parts like Kashmir as well as the Naxal affected areas of Northeast to take up the right path of non-violence, and he asked the people to shun the path of violence. This is in with the coexistence of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, and his relevance has increased after signing the Bodo Accord, and it will serve as an inspiration to renounce the path of violence. And having talked about the 1993 and 2003's previous accords which could not restore the peace completely in this Bodo regions, so after signing this latest accord, no demands of the Bodos are left, and through this pact there will be a newly created Bodoland territorial region, and that will get strengthened. So here he says that everybody has won through this pact, and peace and humanity also has won. Here he also made mention of the Bru Refugees Pact which was signed in the recent past about the Bru refugees who are from the Mizoram that could not be handled for the more than 2 decades. So he also claimed that extremism related deaths are becoming a thing of the past, and how the BJP government has lifted APPSC from many parts of the Northeast after assuming the power. And here he also made a mention about the investment has started pouring into the regions, and industrialization has started to give a new boom to the industries of this region. So in this case already we have learned about the Bodo Pact. Now let us see the history of the Bodo, although we have discussed about it in the earlier videos, right? Coming to the Bodos, they are the single largest community among the notified tribes of Assam, and if we consider them to be the part of larger umbrella called as Bodo Kacheri, then they constitute around 5 to 6% of the population of Assam. Coming to the issue of Bodo, the first organized demand for a separate state of Bodo was done in the years 1967 to 68, and in 1985 when the Assam movement culminated in signing of the Assam Accord, many Bodos saw it as an essentially focusing only on the Assam speaking community. So again in 1987 all Bodo Students Union revived the Bodo statehood demand, and this subsequently renamed itself as National Democratic Front of Bodoland, and later it got separated. Coming to the accords that were signed earlier, because the accord which was signed in 2020 is the third Bodo Accord, because after this 1987 ABSU led movement culminated into a 1993 Bodo Accord. This Bodo Accord paved the way for the Bodoland Autonomous Council, but the ABSU, that is All Bodo Students Union, has withdrew its agreement, and they again renewed its demand for the separate state, and this culminated again in 2003 about called as Bodo Accord, and it was signed by the extremist group called as Bodo Liberation Tiger Force center in state. But yet this led to the formation of Bodo Territorial Council, which is autonomous body under the constitution. Primarily, if we see the Bodo Accord of 2020, this accord will rename the Bodoland Territorial Council as Bodoland Territorial Region, which comprises of Kokrajhar, Chirang, Biksa and Udalgiri, and now for this purpose a commission will be appointed by the state government, and it will examine and recommend if the village is contiguous to this BTAD and with a majority tribal population, and what are the things need to be included into the Bodo territorial region. So this will lead to an increase in the Bodo population within the Bodo territorial region, and it will decrease in non-tribal population, leading to migration of inter-community clashes. And not only this, the government will also establish Bodo Kacheri Welfare Council in order to focus development of Bodo villages which are outside the Bodo development. So not only this, coming to this 2020 accord, there were several provisions that were agreed upon, and this will also give an extension in order to provide more executive, legislative as well as administrative in financial powers to the BTC. And the amendments to the 6th schedule of the constitution will be brought about in order to improve the financial resources as well as the administrative powers of the BTC. So this agreement says that the government of Assam will notify Bodo language in Devangiri Skip as the associate official language in the state. So the article here on the whole is talking about how the novel coronavirus outbreak has caused the tourists to shun the whole of Southeast Asia because of its spread, and also already we have seen 50% drop of demand from the Indian travelers, and among all this, the Kerala is facing the spate of cancellation after this 3 novel coronavirus has been suspected in the state of Kerala. So this novel coronavirus and its rapid spread to different countries has resulted in around 50% fall in demand to Southeast Asia from India, as well as the inbound visitors to the Kerala. Passengers now seems to be shifting to alternative international destinations. So this inbound tourism has also taken a hit, as India has cancelled visas of all the Chinese nationals as well as other foreigners who are planning a trip from China to India. So the next article here is talking about the habitat loss felt upon the leopards. A scientific study on the genetic data of leopards across the Indian subcontinent was conducted by the Center for Wildlife Studies and the Wildlife Institute of India. So this genetic data from leopards was used in order to investigate population structure as well as the pattern of decline of this leopard population. So on the whole, if we try to analyze this genetic analysis, they have tried to show 4 subpopulations within the leopards, namely Western Ghats, Deccan Plateau semi-arid, Shivaliks as well as the Terai region with the high genetic variations. So this study involved a probe into the demographic history of each subpopulation, and they tried to compare the genetic decline analysis with country-wide local extinction probabilities. This studies has given a lot of concern or a fearing factor in order to learn about the leopards. If we see the Indian leopards population now is just 1/10 of what it was over the latest century back, right? So this is experiencing catastrophic decline. It is mainly due to the human presence. Given the threats that this particular leopard faces, there are many threats, but the important one here is the human pressure, right? So there are a lot of conflicts with humans, poaching, habitat loss as well as the availability of prey. So till now we were thinking that the leopard population is kind of stable, and due to this broad geographical distribution, they have suffered a possible human-induced population decline by 75 to 90% between 120 to 200 years ago. The scientists here propose that in a proper title, they have titled it as Genetic Analysis Reveal Population Structure and Recent Decline in the Leopards across the Indian subcontinent. And this was published by a journal called as Life and Environment on Friday. So the scientists from the Center for Wildlife Studies as well as the Wildlife Institute of India argue that the population decline in the species as seen as a wide-ranging and locally abundant, suggests that the leopards demand attention just like the tigers that we are bringing. So maybe now the author here is trying to argue that we should bring we have a project tiger. So here he is arguing to talk about the project leopard also. So coming to the editorial discussion for today, the article here is talking about the upholding the fairness of the sentencing process. Right, so it says the judicial process demand a disproportionate equity that gives due regard to the substantive requirements of the sentencing. The article here especially is talking about the Nirbhaya case that we are seeing, right? So the article here is discussing the manner in which public opinion as well as the society's cry for justice have played a major role or a huge role in sentencing process at the trial as well as the appellate levels of judiciary, including the High Court and Supreme Court, and how what are the implications it will have on the frail trial rights of the convicts. So here they have discussed about a famous case of Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab. A constitutional branch of the Supreme Court in this case has said that while imposing the capital punishment on the offender, the courts, let it be any courts, the session or the High Court or the Supreme Court, a court should consider the aggravating as well as the mitigating circumstances of the offence and the offender when deciding the question of capital punishment. So talking about the aggravating circumstances, this refers to the factors that increases the severability of the criminal act. So it may be example here we can say like heinous nature of the crime or the brutal killings of the people or the prior conviction of the accused, pre-planned cold murder and all, right? But yet the mitigating factors are totally opposite to that of the aggravating factors. Here, these mitigating factors are usually taken into account in order to see why punishment for this particular criminal acts cannot be lessened. Maybe here the factors can be ranging from it wasn't a pre-planned murder, it was an act of crime committed in certain rage and no criminal past of the accused, right? So the death penalty could be imposed as a last option only when the court feels that it would be justice will be compromised if the death penalty is not avoided, right? So the death sentence can only be imposed in exceptional cases involving the extremity of the culpability. If we see in the Nirbhaya case example, the trial court has commented that upon the extreme mental perversion of the accused, which was not worthy of human condonations, and it also reiterated saying that the elements of crime in order to highlight their beastly behavior. Upon the same case, the High Court also elaborately discussed the exceptional nature of this case given the brutality involved in order to conclude that expecting society to demand anything other than the death penalty for the convicts would be unnatural and ludicrous. So the plain reading of this sentence makes it very clear that the public clamor for hanging the rapist made its way into the judicial decision making. So irrespective of the brutal nature of the crime, the circumstances of the convicts, if we talk about the mitigating factor, becomes very crucial, right? Because this sentencing exercise and have to inform the punitive outcomes. So recognizing these deficiencies in the sentencing hearing, especially by the lower courts, now the Supreme Court took it upon itself in order to appreciate these mitigating factors. Now the court has allowed the defense counsel's access to the convicts and it has directed the defense counsel in order to file necessary separate affidavits and in order to document on mitigating circumstances. So all this evidence on this mitigating factors have been presented before the court in the form of affidavits which included the material on socio-economic circumstances of the convicts, their family background as well as some information on their previous occupation. But the uncanny similarities between these mitigating affidavits of the defendants is itself a matter of concern because it does not meaningfully present individual circumstances of convicts. There are a lot of questions which are arising about the quality of the legal representation. So, however, a graver concern is the manner in which the court dismissed the circumstances, saying that these are all irrelevant given the circumstances of the crime in the case. But now, talking about the capital or the death sentence, while it came up with two opposite opinions, if we talk about this Nirbhaya crime, one is that the crime was bound to shook the collective conscience of any human being, and any punishment lesser than the death penalty is going to shake the confidence of the public in the criminal justice system. Especially, the second was being reimposed after the Telangana issue, how rapists were encountered in the name of escape and how they have given an immediate death sentence by the police itself, right? So after this unreasoned dismissal of individual circumstances, if we take, especially the Supreme Court also failed in this case in order to sufficiently answer why life imprisonment was not considered, or why life imprisonment was unquestionably foreclosed. So the courts here failed to discharge any of these burdens. So at its core, imposition of death sentence is to satisfy the collective conscience of the people. Mostly it shows kind of vengeance, couched as retributive justice, which is captured in a phrase what we call it as eye for an eye. So on the whole, if we see, the modern penal systems consider this as an outmoded concept, and even in the Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab, this court has observed that retributive justice means punishment based on blameworthiness of the convict, and it cannot be equated to the revenge or the vindicativeness. But yet, the judgments in this case indicate a strong influence of collective conscience on the outcome. So, in fact, even the Supreme Court's approach is suggesting that the society's cry for the justice by giving the death penalty justifies the imposition of the capital punishment as the only answer, and they do not see any kind of life imprisonment. So on the whole, if we have to say, the execution of the four convicts after the exaction of the legal remedies may give in their case a semblance of due process. While the public has very little patience to appreciate such nonsenses of the law, courts are duty bound in order to maintain a high degree of fidelity to these processes, right? So our culture, ancient India or the culture of India, says that only it is the God which has the possibility of giving life to somebody, and no man should interfere in taking away the life of a person, right? So it is better if somebody can think about the life imprisonment as an option rather than thinking that death sentence will serve any purpose. Next article here is talking about the credit debit card details of the 4 lakh Indians which is put up for sale. This is in context to the revelations which were given by the Singapore-based cyber security company called as Group IB, in which it is saying that a total of 4,61,976 card payment details have been put up on sale on Joker Stats. Joker Stats is nothing. It is one of the most secretive portals on the darknet for buying such information, and it says that 98% of the sensitive credit as well as the debit card details or all of Indian customers has been put on sale. This company also observed that the data is suspected to be collected from the phishing rackets which are on rise in India over the last few years. Apart from this phishing, malware as well as the JavaScript sniffers could also have been used in order to amass the bank card data. So the phishing here means it is a fraudulent attempt by a group of people or a person in order to obtain the sensitive information such as user names, passwords and the credit card details, by disguising themselves as the trustworthy entity in this electronic communication. Coming to the malware, it is any software which is intentionally designed to cause damage to a computer, server, or a client or a computer network. A type of this malware includes even the spyware, which is a software that aims to gather information about an organization, person without their knowledge, and it tries to send such information to another entity without the consumer's consent. Coming to the another mentioned here is about the JS sniffers or the JavaScript. These are the programs used in order to steal the credit and debit card information from the e-commerce websites. So this particular case is trying to show us how sophistication or how well such type of bad intentional people are growing, right? Because previously if we see the type of information which was leaked included information just contained in the card's magnetic strip, right? Which generally used to be stolen through the compromise of offline POS terminals. But this new leak details are very comprehensive in nature, and this included even the card numbers, expiration date, CVV, card holder name, as well as some extra personal information. So such type of data is likely to be have been commissioned online with the use of this phishing malware as well as the JS sniffers. While in the previous case we just dealt with the card dumps, the information correlated with the card magnetic strip, right? So this shows that how well or how comprehensively such type of online marketing is being going on. And the recent revelation is that the second major leak of the cards relating to the Indian banks detected by this group IB threat intelligence team in the past several months. So in October 2019, this group IP threat intelligence team has detected one such incidence of such stealing of database of over 1.3 million credit and debit card records, mostly which contained of the Indian consumers. So for this purpose, with the CERT India, that is Computer Emergency Response Team, it has been alerted about the stolen data which is being offered for sale on this darknet, and there is a need for necessary steps in order to prevent the misuse of the data. So the administration of this cert is likely to issue an advisory in this regard, whereas this may serve as a short-term measure, such issuing of measures by the cert, right? But in the long term, what is that the India needs to do is that with increasing digitalization, especially because India itself is promoting in its program of Digital India, so not only that it should promote the Indians about the digital ways of using, but it is also the responsibility of the government in order to protect them, right? So with this increasing of digitalization and the growing frequency, and if we see it is equally challenging with such type of sophistication and the threat of cybersecurity, now we need some long-term legislation. So maybe for this purpose, the government should talk about some in order to bring some kind of law so that the user training, better public awareness, as well as the technical security measures will be taken care of. The article here is talking about the Mahindra Rajapaksa, who is going to meet our Prime Minister today, and they're going to discuss about the trade and defense issues will be discussed, right? So he has already arrived in the New Delhi, and this is the first official visit abroad after being appointed to the office of the Prime Minister. His visit is follows those of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in the late November, when New Delhi has announced the $450 million line of credit. So according to the statement from the Sri Lankan Prime Minister's office, defense as well as the maritime security corporations, politics, trade and culture, development and tourism will be discussed during this visit. But of all this, development cooperation is likely to be high on the agenda, while it still remains to be seen if our country might announce any kind of new assistance in line with this already line of credit that we have extended in the last November. And this meeting is going to be again important as they are going to discuss about the debt trap. So what do you mean by this debt trap is that the word is famously being used by the West as well as India. It is a term used in order to refer to the large scale Chinese loans. So the Prime Minister will also discuss with our finance, economic as well as policy development portfolios as a task in order to oversee the repayment of the Sri Lanka's mounting external debit on the Chinese. But this meeting also will be important because the Sri Lanka's Tamil leaders will keenly watch if the pending political solutions to Sri Lanka's national questions will be discussed by the Prime Minister or not. So the next important article here is talking about the trade deals before the Trump who is yet to visit our India. But here the article says that there are a lot of gaps which are still remain in the talks, but yet US is disappointed about the new tariffs which were imposed by India. So with the gaps remaining between the positions of India and US, especially in the talks over the trade deal, there are growing doubts on whether the deal will be reached prior to US President's visit to India in the late February. So talking about the US concerns, the US industry or the lobbies and the officials have repeatedly complained about the high tariffs in India, and US wants India to remove the price caps on medical devices, and it wants a deal on dairy products as well as the elimination of tariffs on the information and communication technology products. Coming to the India's concerns is that the US has revoked the India's generalized system of preference benefits in June 2019 on the grounds of saying that there is an inadequate market access for US goods based in India. Now, as a part of the comprehensive trade deal, India and US has been engaged in talks over restoring India's benefits under this US preferential trade system called as generalized system of preference. Not only that, they have even shown the concerns on the recently introduced 2020 budget. The US negotiators have said that they were disappointed about the tariffs which were announced in the union budget, particularly on the import cess that is being given on the medical devices. So currently if we see duties on this medical devices are in a range from 0 to 7.5%, and the budget has proposed a health cess of 5% on medical devices, except those which are exempt from the basic customs duty, right? So this health cess is aimed in order to help the local manufacturers by providing pricing advantage when compared to the imported goods. So this health cess will provide a source of funds in order to help the finance health infrastructure, which is said to be facing a lot of shortage of funds, right? So not only that, the budget has also announced the customs duty to be increased, especially on the agriculture goods, including the walnuts as well as some dairy products like cheese and butter, which constitutes a major share of US exports to India. So the US Chamber of Commerce is said to be concerned about the new tariffs and fees included in the present Indian budget. So these new tariffs cover a wide range of agriculture goods, medical devices, automobiles, parts, electronics and electric vehicles. So the India-US Business Council and the US Chamber of Commerce have long argued that the tariffs which were raised the prices for the consumers, and it may create a friction with trade partners. Ultimately, they fear that it will inhibit the economic growth for both US and India. So the next article here is talking about the government which is mulling on enhancing the audit independence as well as accountability in India. So now the government's consultation papers on the proposed legal changes and amendments in order to enhance the independence as well as the accountability of the auditors. The reason they are talking about these consultation papers or in order to bring about amendments is mainly because of there were many instances about the auditors as well as the auditing entities which are continuously coming under the regulatory lens for alleged misdoings and going against the provisions of the Companies Act. So if we see, it is the Ministry of Corporate Affairs which oversees the Companies Act. So now the government has come out with a consultation paper on the proposed legal changes regarding the auditing in India, and it calls for the suggestion on major issues which are relating to the auditing in India. So the major aspects discussed in the paper, if we see, they are talking about, the paper has suggested for curbing the 5 threats for the independence of auditors. The first is the self-interest, second self-review, third advocacy, familiarity as well as intimidation. And to curb the economic concentration of big 4 auditing firms, namely PwC, Deloitte, EY as well as KPMG. These big 4 operate in India through a network of local chartered accountants firms, and now they feel that there is a need in order to review whether the number of audits under one audit firm or an auditor needs to be reduced, so that this will limit the concentration of businesses in the hands of few firms, and it will help to create a level playing field for others. Now, not only that, this paper has even discussed the need in order to build the capacity of homegrown Indian firms that will be on par with the global organization in terms of audit procedures as well as manpower capacity. So all this suggests that there needs a lot of inspection of audit engagements would be in need in order to help the increase of transparency in the domain of auditing, and the development of composite audit quality index will also improve the accountability of auditors as well as these auditing firms.